I started this podcast 2021 when I started my business, and then cheers.
Here we go. Yingling.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a good beer. So I started Pints of Professionals when the idea came when I was working for a company called Silencer Shop, and they had me interview silencer makers. And I'm like, this is going to be a very short conversation because I know nothing about silencers. So what else are we going to talk about? And I just naturally asked them their background, how they got into, designing silencers for guns and all that stuff. And that eventually led me to the idea, hey, I can do this with some of my clients because they work in pretty cool industries. And 2021, I started my own business. And I didn't have a lot of clients at the time. So I just wanted to start something. I wanted to get busy doing something. And I overproduced the hell out of the show. I had like a 3-camera setup. It was costing me money to do it. But I did it in a brewery. Shout out to Nomadic. And they were really welcoming and open to the idea. And then I started getting busy. I'm like, okay, I can't do this for very much longer. And then once we redid the garage, that's when I knew I could like pick it back up again. But yeah, so it's been in the making since 2021, and it took a 2-year hiatus. Yeah, 2-year hiatus, and then I brought it back in. And there's a microphone there for you to talk to the peeps. What'd you get into today?
If you want to hear me.
Oh, stop it. We want to hear everything. What'd you get into today?
What did I get into today?
Where are you coming from?
Where I'm coming from, we just had breakfast at Another Broken Egg. We decided we'd try it out. So,
okay.
And then I was jamming Maggie Rogers on the way over.
Okay.
Marco turned me on to her.
Right on.
Like, this
Very
is cool. The kind of it's like folk pop that I dig.
Maggie Rogers. Okay. So back up on me. Where was this breakfast at? Another Broken Egg?
Another Broken Egg.
Where's that off of?
I think it's a chain, but it's
yeah.
They've got it at South Park Meadows. So,
oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. My wife Tammy and I went there.
Nice.
Shrimp and grits.
Nice. Do you live in this area?
I do. I live not too far.
Okay. You don't have to give your address because they'll dox you.
Let me give you the coordinates.
Have you tried this other place called The Local? It's right off Brody. Really good breakfast, but more importantly, $6 cocktails during happy hour.
Okay, then.
It is awesome.
I got to try that.
You do, dude. It's really good. What'd you
Near
get?
Evangeline's or?
I just discovered it when I worked with this other musician, Isla Stone. The producer there, Josh, turned me on to Evangeline's. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I've never been. It's right off Brody. It's right in our backyard. I haven't been there in a long time, but yeah, I love that place. Love me some gumbo.
Yeah.
Etouffee. What'd you guys do this weekend?
This weekend, well, the West Texas Exiles and we played a couple of private parties and had a really good time. One of the parties was in Wimberley, and then one was that just popped up the last minute. So a guy at the previous party said, "Hey, do you want to play tomorrow?" And it was right on Lake Austin.
Okay,
quite amazing. I mean, we were so much on the lake that I set my jacket down on the stage and it got splashed by boat water.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It was a blast.
It was some really good time. Decent weather for an outside event.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
It was cool, but not freezing. It was one of the few times of the year that Austin's just got amazing weather.
Yeah, it is kind of weird because I don't know if you could tell, but all the leaves are just dropping in December for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's true.
Very weird.
They're everywhere.
It made me put on my tinfoil hat. I'm like, is this part of the drones?
It totally is. Somebody seeded the atmosphere.
Yeah. This Saturday, I had a few beverages in celebration of UT winning, but
okay, man,
it's been a minute since I've been that hungover. I'm finally recovering. I'm at that age where it takes me 2 days.
Oh yeah, me too. I get a hangover before I get a buzz, so it's like
the other thing that comes with a hangover is like the depression. I don't know if you deal with that, but man, the next day I'm like, I had so much fun the day before, but I am violently ill, and I'm really depressed that I had such a good time. And like, yeah. I don't know when that depression aspect came in, but it's not going away.
Oh no, it hits like a brick wall.
Yeah.
It makes me start thinking like, oh God, I'm going nowhere in life, and I'm like, well, no, you just drank too much the other night.
Yeah, just dial it back next time. But it never do. It's 6:00 by the time we're recording this podcast, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, totally. Somewhere, AM or PM.
So when you guys play these private parties, do you go into it thinking like, what's the vibe? Do you ask like what the vibe is?
It can be so different at different places. It's all about the people throwing it.
Right.
There's people that, whatever, it can be awkward at times because, there's people that do it all the time, and then there's people that don't have a clue as to what goes into just setting up a basic band, and but when it comes down to it, that part doesn't matter so much. If the people, it's the differences are the people really into it, or is it kind of like they're doing it just so that they think it's something their guests will expect or think is cool,
Right. Because when I go to a concert, I know what I'm getting into. I know, I know that I'm going to have a good time and, vibe out with the music. But private parties, I don't know, it just seems different. And as a band, I think you would just kind of, I don't know. How would you go into
it? Well, this weekend we got spoiled on both occasions, both Saturday and Sunday, just because the people were so great.
Yeah.
And they were, they really got into it. And they, it's a party, so there's people talking. It's where we never try to be the center of everything at those kind of deals, but it's more like, it's kind of nice. It's almost like a jam because people aren't so laser focused in, but there's still it's not like just jamming at home because there's still a desire to sound good. So that it actually kind of provides a setting that we don't usually get, which is cool.
When you do perform those private events, are you taking notice of what songs are working for the crowd more so than you would like at a typical show that you guys play?
Yeah, we do. And it's hard to tell because you don't get an audience immediate reaction. You get people later, they're all talking to each other, and later you go up. Sometimes it's a lot of times it's the little kids that kick off the dancing and everything.
That's awesome, right?
I guess once they've gotten a few beers in them, then they
they go back to the little kid mentality, just dance like no one's looking.
Yeah, that's a cool thing that's a lot of fun. And we try to keep those shows upbeat for that reason. It's just more fun. But a lot of the times the people are, they're eating or they're talking to each other, which is what you do at a party.
Exactly.
And later on we'll be talking, they're like, hey, I love that, this cover you did, or what's that one song you were doing that sounded like, well, that it's a delayed reaction, so, we just kind of, we try to, it's finding the balance of like, not needing to be the center of everything, but aware that you're having an impact that might not be visible. You know?
And you've been doing this for quite some time, being a professional musician. Now, I've been filming shows for a very limited time. I'd say like 2 years maybe. One thing that I'm noticing in regards to like videography work and photography work is that, I recorded a show at Antone's 2 weeks ago, and there was this guy on the dance floor. I didn't even know who he was, but he just plopped his tripod right in the middle of the dance floor.
Oh, no.
And I'm like...
He wants it to get knocked over.
Right. And then I've also seen big light panels for photographers using, like blasting the band constantly with continuous lighting. And I'm like, that's got to suck. So in my mind, when I'm going to a show to capture it, I'm trying to limit my visibility to the band, but more so about the crowd. I don't want to fuck that up. And that's like, how do you perceive like someone dropping a tripod down on the dance floor and then the continuous lighting?
I've done so many like photo shoots, and videos and things like that. And the minute, like when I first met you and you took video of us and I saw it back, I was like, oh my God, we look like a real professional band. You know, like this is amazing. And I feel famous. And I think it's a rare gift. You know, it might seem obvious, but I think a lot of people when they're doing their craft, you know, especially people doing video and film, they forget that they're having an impact, and and they forget that they all of a sudden they start taking their eye off of how is they're like, okay, here's what you do, here's the process, and they forget this is going to look a certain way later, you know. And it's kind of like so many photographers have been like, hey, I want you to stand in the middle of this street and pose while cars are zooming past it. And I'm like, so you want me to look terrified the whole time, you know, and like right. like waving to people, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to just make you get in a wreck, you know, or you know, let's do a video right in the middle of a place where it's a business where it's illegal to do a video. You know, it's things like that it's the thought of it is cooler than the end result.
Right.
You know?
And that's what I'm constantly worried about is logistically, where can I place my tripod where it doesn't interfere with the crowd and it's not going to be noticeable to everybody? Because if I can't capture you in your natural habitat of being a musician and playing the show and engaging with the crowd, then I don't need to be there because you're not your authentic self and it's just forced. But anyways,
it's very much appreciated, you know. It shows in your work, you know.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah,
I didn't mean for you to like just talk me up a bit, but it really feels nice.
It's true.
Keep going.
If you're doing the right stuff, I want to talk you up because I'm like maybe everybody else to take a cue from you.
You know, I appreciate that. We'll do some good things in the future. Now let's talk about your past. From Amarillo.
Lubbock,
Damn
actually.
Fuck. Who's from Amarillo?
Well, Daniel is.
That's right.
Yeah,
yeah. Shit. Okay. Well,
now,
that up.
One thing that you'll have to bleep all. No, I'm just kidding. But
this is my show.
I was born in Colorado, in Denver.
Okay.
But my family's all from Lubbock, or you know, from West Texas, for going way back. And my parents. When I was born in 1975, they and all their friends and all the counterculture movement of that era they got into the then 16-year-old guru from India, Guru Maharaji, and
really
so set up camp in Denver, and a lot of, you know, and as a result, some of my cousins and buddies from way back then were also born in Denver. The ones that are from Lubbock.
Yeah.
But, so I'm part of this group that, and then, you know, we moved back, and then the first few years of my life I spent basically in a van
down by the river
down between so many rivers. It was like started Denver, but then it was Lubbock, Austin, North Carolina, upstate New York, like just in a van all over the US.
Kinda. Traveling like the what was that band? Anyways,
Traveling Wilbury.
But back to the I think the documentary was called Wild Wild Country, about that dude. It was an interesting documentary. Did you see it?
I think Wild Wild Country. Which one was that?
That was about the I think it's the Indian or the yogi practicing yoga and created his own cult.
That was not Maharishi, Osho.
Yeah, okay.
The one up in Oregon.
Okay.
And this one makes way more of a boring story than that,
right,
you know, because there was no guns involved or anything.
Yeah, but my mind went off a different tangent there.
But yeah, this one it you know, it wound up being, I don't know if there were scandals or anything, but it wound up just being a long-term. You know, he's still around teaching, and it's self-help kind of stuff, I guess, you know.
And while you guys are traveling around in this, you know, van, what kind of ways were you guys making money to, you know, support the lifestyle?
It was my parent. It was my mom and stepdad at the time.
Okay.
Both musicians.
Got it. Okay.
You know, staying with family a lot. One thing we did was we never stayed in hotels. We stayed either in the van or in a tent. That was kind of like a rule. You know? So, I think that, you know, they would just do odd jobs, play shows, you know, in different states. But And actually, that's a good question. I need to ask them, hey, how did y'all survive back then? I never noticed you working, so maybe I don't want to know.
Yeah. Either way, you guys survived. You made it, and I think that's the most important thing.
It is.
Especially when it comes to being an artist, you sacrifice what some would call a normal type
Stability,
of life.
Yeah, definitely.
And you find the love and passion in your art, and I think that's something there's value in that, in my opinion. And I'm always interested in like, how do you make it work in today's economy? But that's another conversation that we can have later. Now, when did you finally settle down? Do you remember that?
Well, yeah,
because you had to go to high school, and I remember those stories.
I guess we settled down in Lubbock when I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And because I started kindergarten and everything. I actually remember preschool in Lubbock and in Austin.
Oh, all right.
Would have like go out on like little roller skate outings, and I remember another one, Bites the Dust, playing on the radio, and some of those songs, but yeah, Lubbock, we settled when I was about 5, and I was there till I was 14. Moved to Austin then.
Okay. Now, at a young age, were you engaging with any musical instrument? Were you just, kind of?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, when I was 4, I think I did that Suzuki violin lessons, and my mom would take me to Tech actually for lessons, and I remember that somewhat. It didn't stick. I tried violin again when I was 6 years old. I was in the little orchestra, and,
okay.
and I just, for one thing, I could not read music to save my life. I could only play by ear, and but that, guitar I picked up probably about then when I was like about 12 or so. My mom got me some guitar lessons in Lubbock, and
were they fun?
They were. I really enjoyed it.
I remember getting guitar lessons in Alpine, Texas, and I'm like,
oh, okay,
this sucks. I don't want to do this. I want to be, the Stevie Ray Vaughan. I want to be the Jimi Hendrix already. Why do I have to go to these lessons?
Oh my God. Yeah. It hurts your hands like hell. And
I'm thankful that, my parents were like, okay, this guy wants to play guitar. Let's give him a proper teaching. I forget his name. I think his name is Bannon, Steve Bannon.
Okay.
I think he's still there in Alpine, but no, phenomenal blues guitar player. And but as you take guitar lessons, what type of music were you wanting to mimic and play?
Well, by the time I got into guitar, when I was 8 years old, I was way into Michael Jackson. I was just Thriller was out, and I was crazy about that. And I loved like the pop and rock and roll on MTV. I'd go over to my grandparents' house to watch all that, because we didn't have MTV. But then by the time I picked up the guitar, I was getting into Buddy Holly. I think my dad had given me a cassette tape of it. I'd just sit there at night and listen to it all night, and so I wanted to learn that. My guitar teacher was showing me stuff like that, and
that's cool.
I very soon after got into punk rock. I really got into the Sex Pistols, so I'd bring a tape, and he was like, oh, please don't let it be a live tape, because it's he's like, this is not music, I can't tell what they're doing, right. but the Sex Pistols songs were great and had really good riffs. They were based in rock and roll, so things like that. I really got into the blues. My guitar teacher showed me some things like Freddie King and B.B. King, and got into Stevie Ray Vaughan,
So what, I'm trying to phrase this question. Well, let's fuck it. Why did you get to Austin? How did you get to Austin?
My dad had moved here years before, and in fact, all through the 80s, I would come visit him, as much as I could. He would come to Lubbock. And so I had, I got a good taste of Austin all throughout my life. And I'd briefly lived here as a baby pretty much. So I always had a strong connection to it. And then I moved to Austin, and then my mom did shortly after, and I kind of stayed with her some and my dad some, but by that point, you know, a lot of the family, all the Flatlanders had moved to Austin.
Okay.
And, Joe Ely and Butch Hancock and my dad. So, by the time I got here, it felt, you know, it felt like home.
Okay. Did you feel a difference between Lubbock and Austin?
Oh man, on every level. It could not have been more different. It was like shell shock, you know, I mean, in a good way, generally. It was, it's just the whole world opened up, you know?
Yeah.
Style wise, I felt like I was all of a sudden connected. It's weird looking back because Lubbock was so, from early days, it was so connected to every part of the world, you know, through Buddy Holly, but also through, like Waylon Jennings and it, you know, Bob Wills was from out there. So Lubbock was a little bit of and Lubbock's called Hub City. And so it was a musical hub, but it didn't feel that way, when I was young and so many relatives had moved, and I went to school with a bunch of, you know, I went to school just up the street from Buddy Holly's home, and the kids in school didn't even know who Buddy Holly was. So I felt like a complete outsider. Now going back, you know, and when there's the right group of people there, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the Lubbock that the Beatles were so fascinated with, and,
right.
and the Rolling Stones were so fascinated with. And
it is an interesting part because I remember growing up in Alpine, kids in like 8th grade were going to go see Korn in Lubbock, and I had just moved from California, and I go, what the heck? Why would they go through Lubbock? Like, what is this? What is this place about?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, maybe, is it along I-10 or I-20?
No, it's 27 goes up through it.
Okay.
But
what is it about that spot? I mean, historically, obviously it bred, you know, Buddy Holly, but why Lubbock? Why are these
well, I
bands
get, you know,
through that?
some people, I think there's a particular crowd there that there's probably a lot of Korn fans in Lubbock, but I think with Lubbock, it depends on which way you're routing, but there's, you know, Texas is off the route map for a lot of people. You know, a lot. You go to California and New York, or even like Kansas City and places like that, and you're like, oh, these bands all go through here. That you have to go out of your way to get down to Houston. And you know, growing up in the 80s, Austin was not a big city, and bands didn't make it down here unless it was a destination. You know, now that's all changed. But it used to be that if you wanted to see any big band, you had to go to San Antonio or Houston or Dallas. You know, Lubbock is, if you're up that way, it's not so out of the way. You know, if you're cutting through New Mexico and Santa Fe and Albuquerque and doing that thing, then you can go through Lubbock and then get up to through Oklahoma and all that. But whereas Austin is way down, you know.
When you first got to Austin, were you playing in bands? Were you trying to find a band at wait, you said you moved here 14?
Yeah, I moved here when I was 14. Okay. At the time, I think somewhere in the back of my head, I always knew I was going to want a band, and that's what I was going to want to do. But I pushed it off to the side a little bit. You know, the first band that let me get up on stage with them and play a few times, you know, several times in a row, was a band called Matt the Cat and the Gutter Rats, and it was Matt Hillier's band from Dallas.
Name.
Yeah, such a great name. And he moved to Dallas and formed 1100 Springs, but they were a rockabilly band, you know, do Reverend Horton Heat covers and stuff like that. And they would, you know, I got to be where I could play rhythm enough to where they'd be, come up on stage with us a little, you know. But
how did you foster that? Because it's kind of I feel like that's a big deal. Like, you're being invited up on stage. And
yeah, that you know, I was still taking guitar. I took guitar lessons again in Austin. I had some great teachers. Danny Barnes was one of them, of the Bad Livers. But now I was learning from these great teachers, this great technique and everything, but I was playing punk rock, and that was almost an unwritten rule of like, don't get too good at anything before you get on stage, like just,
right.
You're up there to annoy people, and, you need to, don't be flashy or anything,
There was actually a moment at Kroll Snake, I think last weekend or this weekend, where someone, Gigi Allen, the stage.
Oh no.
Are you familiar with Gigi Allen?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So apparently he took a dump on stage, and
wow.
I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if I don't listen to his music. I don't know if there was music. I would imagine that there was, because you can't get invited to play a stage like that unless you're a musician of some sort. But I think the internets are saying he's not going to be playing anywhere anytime soon. And is that rock and roll to take a shit on stage? I mean,
man, I guess it was at one point. I think now, it's been done, and it's so if you do it, you got to do it in a very original, cool way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could muster that up.
No, that's I would be shy. I would be camera shy, to say the least. So
Gigi Allen would. I had friends that were just crazy about him.
I don't get that.
There was some early Gigi Allen that I liked. It was called The Jabbers, and it was like early, kind of more popish, and it was cool, like catchy stuff. I don't know why he just went off the deep end and just started doing, the music just got super terrible.
Yeah.
And I thought, but my friends would go and they'd be like, you have to sign a waiver if go in the club,
if he starts flinging
if he attacks
matter.
you, then
my brother-in-law, I think he's a fan of Gigi Allen for what he did to the music scene, but whatever. He also my brother-in-law told me the story about Gigi Allen meeting Johnny Cash, and how Gigi Allen was very respectful because he respected Johnny Cash for what. I'm like, that is wild to think that this guy who's just flinging shit on stage is being super respectful to the Band in Black.
It is, yeah. And I think the guy was genuinely crazy, but I also think there was at least some element of showmanship in it,
Sure.
And that's kind of turned out to be true of a lot of bands that when I was young, they seemed super crazy, and later on I was like, okay, it was a bit of an act, and
I think, do you think we're getting away from that in live music shows?
Yeah, I do. I think that like a couple of years ago, it's been a while now, but a friend of mine, he was like, my wife is she's the choir teacher at Westlake, which is like I remember Westlake had the best choir, and her kids are putting on a production. He was like, will you take one for the team and come with me, and because generally you're like, oh, a high school, song production, like, okay.
It's not very punk rock of you.
But I went and I was like, the songs that were kind of show tuney sort of stuff, but they sang it so well, and they put so much into they made a real show out of it. And it dawned on me, I was like, if at the time I was doing just solo shows, and I was part of that just Austin singer-songwriter thing. And I was like, if a handful of us put like even 50% of what these guys are doing into one of our show and made it an actual entertaining, and I was like, we would just take over the world, like and I was like that, but we don't see the value of it, or we don't think we can do it, or just the idea of it seems so you have to be able to, you got to be good at it, or at least learn to be good at it,
right.
And also you have to get past that little thing of, oh, this is my buddies here, and I'm just speaking nothing but truth to them. You have to be like, no, there's a showbiz going on here. I'm gonna do some things that aren't just me. You know?
But I also feel maybe we're just too consumed with our phones and what's going on social media to take a step back and realize what we're watching before us is actually really hard to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to remind myself, well, whatever concert or, music thing I'm going to, I'm just like, all right, this individual is taking the courage to come up on stage and pour their heart out, and that's tough to do.
It is.
And
yeah.
anyone who does that, you have my respect.
Yeah, and it's there. That's an element of music that's there. It's not just showbiz. Even if you're good at that, or even if you see the value in that, the music is a heart-to-heart language, like at its core.
Yeah. So you get invited up on stage to play a few songs with this band. Did you think you were good enough at that point?
No, I wasn't, but I was like, I could tell, I was like, I could tell I could get good enough, it was at that point, and then it was all like me trying to form bands in high school. And, I would just kind of, for a while, I would just kind of take what I could get. It's like anybody who's just willing to like meet up in somebody's garage and start playing is like, that's good enough,
Yeah.
And I realized, I was like, I did realize at a certain point that if you want to find people that are good enough to actually make the band start playing out and presentable, you got to look a little harder than that.
Yeah.
You got to have some standards, and you got to hold yourself to a certain standard too.
How old were you when you played that show?
Well, like when
you got invited.
Well, I think I was probably, I want to say like 15 maybe. When I played with Matt the Cat and the Guitar, 15 or 16.
Was it at a bar?
And it was, where it was La Zona Rosa, which is not there anymore.
R.I.P., yeah.
But yeah, one of the great, just one of the coolest places in the world.
Yeah, last show I saw there was Brian Setzer.
Oh,
when he came
man.
Was
it his big band?
It was his big band, and then he did like a stripped down set with Phantom.
Okay.
God, what's his name? The bassist.
Oh, okay. Oh, from the Stray Cats, or
yeah.
Oh my God.
Fuck, I forget his name.
That would have been killer.
It was fun. It was
I
really
saw
cool.
the Stray Cats at Summerfest.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't got to one up me on this show, Colin. It's all right. No, that's awesome. Such a talented musician. Now, as you kind of grow up through Austin, what were your plans out of high school? Did you want to go to college? Did you want to just continue to play music?
I was like basically trying to fail out of high school. I was like,
you were a bad kid.
I disliked sitting in a chair for an hour or for, multiple hours. It drove me crazy.
It
so
did
I was
suck.
like,
I hated that.
I was like, what can I do to not encourage people to want me to keep doing this, but I lacked discipline in music also. So I was in punk bands in high school, and it's funny, one of the guys that I befriended when I was 16 named John Matthew Walker, and he and I formed a band, and we were, it was music that was just, we were just playing music to show we could, and there was some hidden gems in the music, but a lot of just kind of annoyance on stage, like that kind of playing for the vibe, But right. John turned out to be like a wonderful songwriter. He's amazing. He's in a band called High Heavens here in town, and they are just amazing. And a couple other of my friends are still in that band from the high school days too. But when I got out of high school, I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do next. With, by the encouragement and financial help of my stepmother, mostly my dad too, but he was a musician and not making any money. But my stepmom, she put me through college, and I actually made good grades in it because I felt it occurred to me how fortunate I was to have that help, and I didn't want to let her down. But the whole time in college, I was kind of like, well, I started out as sound recording, and pretty quickly I realized I didn't have the knack for that.
What about it didn't you like?
Oh, it just got too technical. There was too much of a disconnect between the two sides of the glass, like what, the buttons and knobs, how they relate to the actual music being played.
Yeah.
And it just, I got a feeling, I was like, I'm just not good at this. I'm not going to, and it was also everybody, even the people in school were saying, if you go into a studio and say, I have a degree in sound recording, they're just going to laugh at you and say, all right, well, what can you actually do? Like they're going to hire somebody who's been in a studio working before they hire you. So I switched to anthropology, just because I needed a major. I wanted to finish, and I was like, this seems easier than a computer science degree. So, but it wasn't until I got out of college, but also I took classical guitar in college, which was, got my chops up a lot with the guitar. And
I can imagine.
I learned a lot musically in that. But it wasn't until I got out of college that I just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a stab at being like a singer-songwriter with a band,
And I think it just makes me appreciate going to Studio 601 and watching Mike and Eric like very delicately place these microphones in different positions.
Oh, it's amazing, man.
And I'm like, how do you know how to do that? Like, it's just through experience, This is the way the drum resonates. So you want to place it above. And I go, my God, you guys are pure brilliance.
And they're both phenomenal musicians too. I think that ultimately is what makes it so good, is that they're just some of the few people that can master both those things,
Yeah. So you're playing classical music for the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Did that elevate your practice regimen?
For a while it did. I've got ADD, and it really showed when I was in school. I learned some songs, playing classical. I learned some technique. There came a point where I was like, this is also not going to be my professional calling, is sitting there with a classical guitar.
Do you think so? I had this DJ. Ganimal Gerald made this point in one of our podcasts. He goes, if schools would do a better job of making kids understand that, hey, you need to understand this portion of mathematics for this cool engineering job that's going to, contribute to society in this way. Yeah. Like, I think school could have been much more engaging if they said, you need to learn this so that way you can go write for the New York Times or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think they did a good job.
It's amazing that they haven't figured that out by now.
Right.
Or how to do it,
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, just shut up and learn it. And
because I said so.
Memorize it. You
right.
know, that's the thing. Memorize it so you can forget it 10 minutes later. That's how that went. Yeah, there wasn't a lot. There wasn't an emphasis on making it interesting or making it. Some teachers had a knack for it, but they were kind of few and far between. I feel like,
right,
that could show you how you could apply what you learned.
I think with the idea of learning classical music, it and correct me if I'm wrong, it would prepare your hands for doing, like, it would help you make that connection with your brain. And I don't know, there's just so much more.
It does. It really, music does that. You know, if people get into it and learn it, it helps little kids get a kind of integrate their brain a lot, you know?
So when did you graduate? UT or
Texas State or Southwest Texas?
Hey, eat 'em up, cats. Yeah.
SWT.
Right on. How cool was Sewell Park in the river?
Oh man, yeah, loved it.
We went there for college, and then my favorite part of the year was the summertime because the town would empty, and we kind of have that, you know, little.
You
town
could find a
ourselves.
parking space.
Exactly.
Yeah. Definitely. San Marcos was a blast.
Yeah, it was a good time. We're gonna pause real quick for a commercial break. This one is sponsored by Resolute Media. I don't know if you heard of them. Some people have been saying I need to be more professional about these taglines, so I hired my buddy Ralph to create one for me, or commercial, whatever you want to call it. So, the key to a good headshot is capturing some desire on film. You want the audience you're trying to engage to be attracted to, almost lusting for the person in the photo. Words on a page can only do so much, and we are by nature visual creatures. So let me tell you, here at Resolute Media, we have fucked a lot of photos. Thank you, Ralph. I will probably not get any more sponsorships out of that one. But
come on now.
So you graduate Southwest Texas State, eat 'em up. What was your next move?
Next move, my sister gave me a bunch of airline miles for my graduation present. And so me and my friend John,
that's awesome.
It was amazing. And my friend John and I, that I was talking about earlier, he and I just went to Europe and bummed around for a month. Just, got doing trains all over Western Europe. And we brought our guitars and just busked. It ran out of money pretty quick, and just slept on
those
the
pints
ground.
can get pretty expensive.
Yeah, right.
Especially when you're drinking them so fast.
Yeah, and it was quite a musical experience. He and I learned when you're sitting there strumming a guitar out in a town where you don't really speak the language and there's other kids doing that, that showmanship thing comes into play,
Sure,
And John had that down, I didn't, but he did. And by the time we got to when we were like in Dublin, we tried it and people one person tipped us like a stick of gum or something, but then when we got to Cologne, we were like, hey, this actually, this paid for our hostel and our food did it. We could just stick around and make money doing this, and,
right.
And playing everything from blues to like some Texas Tornadoes and stuff like that.
So that was your first official tour.
Yeah, pretty much it was. Yeah.
What countries did you visit?
We England and Ireland.
Awesome.
And then kind of all the we briefly went to like the Netherlands. Rode a bus through Belgium at night. Same thing at a train through Switzerland at night. But then got to hang out in Germany a few days. Hung out in Italy for a few days.
Yeah.
France just a little bit. Spain for a few days.
Okay.
We kind of jumped around.
Yeah, that sounds so cool.
Got back to England. Now England, my God, we were staying with two friends of John's named Helen and Carl, and the guy Carl, who I'd never met before, he was a DJ at this club called Turnmills. It's not there anymore, but it was the happening spot in London at the time. It was like we met the Chemical Brothers. They would play there.
Oh wow, okay.
Fatboy Slim would DJ there every weekend or like all the time.
Was this before they kind of blew up, or was this right?
Right as they were blown up. Like when I met the Chemical, I didn't know they were like, oh, it's good meeting you two.
Yeah,
and came back and I'm like, oh, they're on the cover of the Rolling Stone. It was. And Fatboy Slim at that point, Funk Soul Brother was I had that in my head.
It was popping.
So yeah, they were. It was kind of not. I don't think it was quite at their height, but it was as they were getting into that, and that was wild. I did not see that coming, but just going to England for my first time.
Do you remember the plane flight?
Let's see. Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because I really don't like long plane flights. I think they suck. And now we're afforded the luxury of our cell phones, and they had. Did they have like in-flight movies at the time, or did you have to raw dog it and read a book or something?
I'm trying to remember.
Okay, it's not that important. I'm sorry. That's just
no. Now it's got me thinking, because I do remember, like, all I remember is that John wrote on a napkin, something like, welcome, welcome on board flight, blah, blah, blah. Please enjoy Home Alone 4 on repeat for 10 hours. Or, so obviously, I guess they did have some movies going on.
Well, I mean, that's a good movie.
Yeah. That
was the first movie that made me cry this year. Oh, I'm sorry, in December. It's that scene where, and I told Trinidad that scene where Kevin walks into the church right before the shenanigans are about. And the old guy comes in.
The old guy, yes.
That made me tear up.
That was a tearjerker. Yeah, because it's It's very relatable.
And there's this other one. It's called 8-Bit. It's about this kid trying to get into the NES system back in like the 80s when it first came out or whatever. And towards the end of the movie, spoiler alert, you find out like he didn't get the NES, he didn't get the system, but his dad built him a fort. And that fort kind of forged them working together on woodworking projects.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the movie, they're having Christmas dinner. And, of course, the dad's not there because he's passed on. And I'm just like, oh, my God.
Yeah, that'll hit you. Those movies, you know, I mean, at the time when you watch, you were like, oh, it's so corny.
Yeah.
But, man, they're powerful.
Yeah.
And that it's such, I'm like, you can't take movies having a good, you know, message in it for granted, because a lot of them don't.
So you get back. What year was this, by the way?
That was we went in. It was I graduated in '98, so we went in '99, and then I went immediately back overseas to India for a month. And I joined a volunteer vacation group. I'm putting that in air quotes because we didn't really do a lot of volunteering. We just kind of donated some money.
Sure.
Now, and I spent, I think, 3 days just on my own in New Delhi, and that was crazy. I mean, I was like, I'd never experienced that before, you know.
Go on, elaborate. What was the food like? What was the sleeping situation?
I had the best and the worst food I've ever had in India. The best food was in Delhi, like in this kind of alley in this restaurant. It was just absolutely amazing. And then out in the Himalayas, we stayed. This group that I was with, we stayed in a village out in the mountains, like in the foothills of the Himalayas, in Garhwal. Stayed with villagers, but there was a restaurant out in the middle of nowhere that just said Coca-Cola all over it. The worst sag paneer I've ever even conceived of. And
did you get sick?
I did. I got a flu. We took a train down from Delhi to central India out in the jungle. Stayed in an ashram run by lepers, people with leprosy who had been kicked out of their village into the jungle. You know.
Yeah.
And a wealthy man spent his life threw his money away just getting these people together, and he said, okay, I'm going to put some money up, but you guys are going to take this over, build this place and run it. And you're going to be self-sufficient. And they did. So we did that. And I got sick on the train ride there, and I got a flu. And it was like, you know, I quit eating for 3 days. And I've actually got a picture. A guy there took a picture of me laying on a bed. He said, here, hold this knife against your chest, you know, and I look like a skeleton with a beard, you know, and but that same guy, his name was Ashok. He on the train ride down, he bought me a cheap guitar, and the only time we made use of it was on the train in the middle of the night. The group, it was a bunch of people, 2 women from India, older ladies from India that ran the whole thing, and then a couple of people from America. It's all young people. Otherwise, it was like one lady from Poland. All these Western kids, basically, you know, like me. We all just jammed and sang along music. But I started playing stuff like Red River Valley and a bunch of old American songs. And none of the kids from America knew the songs, but then the old people from India and this old couple from Iraq, they all knew the songs. So there was a much bigger age gap than there was a country gap when it came to the music.
Okay,
you know?
That's fascinating. Interesting. So when you get back to the States after this trip, what did you do next?
Got back and you know, I was working at Whole Foods at the time, and it was like I was cashiering, and I was like, oh my God, I'm being crammed in this little space again. And my dad went on tour, and he said, hey, do you want a roadie? Like, you'll drive and roadie, and a few of the shows you can open the show, you know, or sit in with us, you know. And so I did that, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And
your second tour.
Yeah, exactly. First paying tour. And I was like, I was like, Dad, can we do this all the time? And he was like, no, we can't.
Yeah, but both physically and mentally, we really can't do this.
And but that really, I was just like, man, I think I want to do this,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like, a little spoiled. I mean, at that point, my dad, they were riding pretty rugged, they were riding in a van, not in a bus or anything. But we were staying in hotels, and we were getting paid.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And we're playing in front of big crowds, and so, when I got back, Django Walker, Jerry Jeff Walker's son, he had a Wednesday residency at Threadgills up north.
R.I.P.
Yeah, exactly. A COVID casualty, that place. And he said, hey, Colin, do you want to take it over? And I was like, yeah. So that was my first, when I started playing where my name was listed,
on the marquee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do residencies help you out as a musician, both financially and, getting the experience?
They can. I think the trick to residencies is you have to grow within them, or else it becomes like just sort of a chore, and it becomes a chore for the audience,
Yeah.
The Exiles and the Continental Club, there's a certain, when you play the Continental Club, the people, they're excited to be there, but you got to bring it to them, and I think the guests that we had really helped, and we tried to, we just had so much fun playing, and also the Continental Club is special in that there's enough of a local crowd and a tourist crowd that can actually create a little scene there late on a Wednesday night, which is,
a very good point.
But I have done residencies before where I kind of realized at a certain point, I'm just going through the motions, and it's a little painful, you know. It's
So you do the residencies. What are you practicing more? Are you becoming more dedicated to practicing guitar or writing songs?
Well, it is practice, you really, if you want to do a residency right, you should be practicing alongside. You can't consider being on stage practice because you're not going to be
good.
And unless it's a certain song that everybody kind of knows, you can't be like, hey, let's try a new song.
So you've also played in Alpine at the Railroad Blues.
Yes.
I remember seeing your poster there. I'm like, holy shit, that's Colin.
Yeah.
He probably came through when I was just a wee lad in high school. When was the last time you've been out there by yourself?
By myself?
To play at the
It's been
Railroad Blues?
a long time. I want to say, so I did some Viva Big Bend shows on my own, or with I did a duo with Nicolette Good. We went out there probably 5-6 years ago.
Okay.
And we played in Alpine. It was not at the Railroad Blues. It was probably at the Holland Hotel or something, you know. But I hadn't played the Railroad Blues in probably 10 years or so. So getting to play it again with the Exiles, I was like, get on stage and go, hey, this is what I meant to say all this time, this is the kind of music for this, the
Railroad Blues was really cool. Richard and I forget his other name, the other co-owner at the time. Damn it, I'm sorry. All he drank was soul beer. That's all he drank.
That's right. And they would take you
in the back
for the sangria. Yeah. Oh my God.
And I remember my buddies invited me to play drum. I could barely play the drums, but as we practiced more and more, I could carry the beat. And, it seemed like all the drummers that they were working with at the time just weren't dedicated. They weren't showing up to practice. So I was the guy. I'm like, I like your music.
That counts for a lot.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll show up. Hey, I'm not the best, but I'll put in a good effort. And I remember sitting outside of the Blues because we couldn't get in, listening to the Red Elvises. They were playing, and my buddy was like, we got to go check them out. I'm like, but we're 18. We can't get in there. He goes, it's fine. We'll just sit outside. And we did, and it was really cool. And then I think the next year, I was playing with a band of, I think I was 20 at the time. and we were opening up for the Rockland Eagles.
Okay.
If you're familiar with who they are. But they were a really heavy rock and roll band, and I was so fucking nervous. But yeah, we just played our songs. I think we had like a 30-minute set, 40-minute set, whatever it was. And then I just felt like the biggest rock star because I was drumming with the big X's on my hand.
Yeah.
And like at the end of the night, they took us back. And even though I wasn't, maybe we shouldn't say this on camera, but I partaked in the sangria shots, but it wasn't sangria.
Right.
But yeah, it's such a cool little town. And Viva Big Bend, that whole
That's a blast,
concert
man.
series.
Stuart's
It's
got
fun.
a great
Yeah.
thing going.
Yeah. I worked it one year and then I attended the next, and it's just such a good time.
It
When
is.
we would go out there, we start off with a shot of Sotol at the Holland, and yeah, we just walked to every venue. Everyone was so nice. Everyone's having a good time. Hardly any troubles. We saw one bar fight, but it was de-escalated pretty quick.
It's they people tend to be in a good mood at that, you know.
It's a nice reprieve from the busy city life, and to see a bunch of good music for, pretty good price. It's hard to beat.
It really is.
So flash forward years to you. Who did you meet first in the West Texas Exiles, and how did that come to be?
Well, Eric actually reached out to me.
All right, so far everyone's got their story straight.
Yeah.
There's no lies in what Trinidad or Danny has said.
Only bad memory. Eric reached out to me. He shot me an Instagram message.
He DM'd.
He DM'd me.
Nice.
Drunkenly, he said. But he was like, hey, Colin, it was just post-pandemic, and I was just like, man, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And Eric DM'd me, and here's the funny thing is at that time, 2022, I was playing a show at the airport, kind of going, I really need to make a new life music. I got to try something else, besides just doing a lot of solo stuff, mostly, just gigs that fall in my lap, and Mike Meadows, the amazing drummer, percussionist, and songwriter here in town. He's an old friend of mine, and he walked by and we started talking. We were like, hey, let's make like a band, or let's just help each other get back on the scene,
Yeah.
And he said, I've got this guy, John Calvin Abney, that I've been playing with. And a little bit later, he talked to John. He was like, hey, I think the three of us are all in on this, and John Calvin Abney's like, I had never heard of him, but I checked him. It was this guy from Oklahoma, but checked him out online. I was like, oh man, this guy's really something else as a guitar player and as a songwriter. I was like, this is really cool. And, but right as I met them, I met Eric, and I went over to their studio, and I met Trinidad and Daniel and Marco, and it was like, man, I was like, where have you guys been all my life? This is amazing. I was like, and these guys, they said they wanted to do some shows together, maybe write. And I was like, this is really cool. And, John Calvin Abney ended up going, he went to do it. He went on tour opening for Hanson solo, which is wild. Toured Australia and everything. And I ended up joining the Exiles. The Exiles, it was like we had been all just waiting for that moment to happen, and up until then I wasn't even aware of them, and I was just amazed and wait out these backstories. But this little thing happened, interesting. So in 1 month, John Calvin Abney and Mike both got real busy and started doing their thing, and I joined the Exiles, and not until maybe a half a year later did I discover that the same month that I was switching from one to the other, the Exiles that month were putting out their single, New Moon Foe. And I had no idea about this, but John Calvin Abney was putting out a single, Full Moon Friend. And so it was like I was transitioning from one to the other. And I mean, what are the odds of those two songs even existing side by side, let alone that it was in such a close circle,
it's weird how the way the universe works.
It is. There's some wild synchronicity going on.
Yeah,
You know?
and it makes me believe that if you put out, good energy, you're doing good work, the universe will take care of you.
Something good will come of that. I'm quite sure. Yeah.
There's countless nights where I'm cooking my meals at the stove and I'm thinking about, next month, and I go, I don't have anything next month.
Yeah.
And it's a very scary feeling.
Yeah.
But then I'll get an email like, hey, we want you to come shoot this. I'm like, yeah, totally. Let's do it. So it's a scary feeling being in the world of being an artist. How do you cope with that sense of feast or famine type of mentality, I guess?
Yeah, I'm learning to.
We're all learning.
It's there's something in there's like a little magic spot because sitting there worrying about it doesn't help, and it makes things worse.
Yeah.
It's bad for you. It's bad for your art. It kind of starts eroding the relationships you have, which are everything in this business,
right.
But also staying engaged and going, all right, well, this is something I need to stay on top of, and trying to, that there's an element of faith that has to be there, which is hard when things are going bad. It's like, well, isn't faith a stupid thing to have right now?
I need money, not faith right now.
Exactly.
So as you guys kind of cultivated this band, where did you find yourself amongst the other band players? What did you think your strength was that you were bringing to the band?
Well, it was challenging because I heard them play and I was just like, oh my God, I immediately was like, if I write a song, I want Marco or Daniel to sing it,
Yeah.
and they're such great musicians that I was like, if I'm going to play with these guys, I really got to kind of up my game, I got to, because for one thing, it's not just me strumming and singing songs. It's going to be me playing on other people's stuff a lot. So
yeah.
One thing that happened is Daniel and Marco both play guitar, and so I was like, well, I can play some acoustic, but I need to do something else. So I brought the mandolin, and that's something I'd been getting more and more into. But
It's
I was
a sick
like,
mandolin, by the way. You play it very well.
Thank you. It forced me to go, if I'm going to play with these guys full time, I got to learn this thing, because the mandolin, if you're not doing it right, it can really get in the way, and it will feed back at every show at some point. So it's, you gotta make the thing justified,
So bringing in the mandolin was your strength?
Yeah, that was part of it.
That's all it took? Bringing in a tiny guitar?
The mandolin, and then I showed them these songs of mine, and they,
those songs are?
They dug them, that I showed them my song Black Vines, my song The You That I Knew, song Circles in the Yard, and at this point, I think now we're at the point where I'm like, I need some new songs, the ones that I sing anyways. We'll keep playing those other ones, but yeah, I brought those, and I was like, they were like, they dug them, and they were like, this is different than what we're doing, and they kind of gave the songs a chance because they are different enough to where I was like, I was kind of going, is this gonna throw off their vibe a little, but the more we played together, we incorporated my songs into the sound, so and it's different when I play it with these guys than when I played on my own or with a different band. So that's another thing I brought, a different form of songwriting.
What do you think? What's different from these guys to the previous bands? I asked Trinidad the same thing.
For one thing, the musicianship and the sort of camaraderie, their similar view of what music should do on stage, and it's kind of unspoken, and there's something very West Texas about it. And it's why a lot of times a band from West Texas that's really got that energy and that spirit, it's not like, okay, if you're from West Texas, you're guaranteed to be this, but at certain times there's a certain like urgency to the music to where you don't just go through the motions of a song. If a song is getting boring, you do something to start connecting with the audience again.
Yeah.
And I remember that's what was so special about like people like, Joe Ely and Jesse Taylor, when they'd come to Austin, people are like, oh shit, what's that from? What is that? And like the Texas Bel Airs, I remember they played at Momo's one time and everybody was like,
Momo's.
Wow.
Never got to go to that venue.
Momo's was amazing. It was wonderful. But there is a certain thing, a certain amount of like just raw power and energy that Lubbock and now I'm learning El Paso has a similar vibe, but Amarillo too. There's a certain amount of desolation that brings about this crazy energy that people in Austin and people all over just kind of, it wakes them up, you know?
The Mars Volta is the one band that comes to mind from West Texas. They played, I think they're out of El Paso.
Okay. Yeah.
They have crazy energy. So I think there's an obvious answer because all of you guys are seasoned veterans of being in different bands. Is there just a common feeling of like, let's make this one work? We know what didn't work in other bands. We know what worked in other bands. Now let's just take all the good things that we learned from our experiences and put into this one. Is that pretty much it? Yeah,
definitely. Well, when somebody presents a song, we automatically start, kind of jamming it a little, listen to the person play it. And then when Trinidad starts getting a beat going for it, I think that's kind of like when the vibe starts happening, And there's something about Eric's bass playing with Trinidad. It's like it's just this full sound, and it's engaging. I can listen to them jam together, and that's entertaining. Yeah. And then I think Daniel's many years playing in a mega church just got his chops just way up on the keys, and it just made it so musical, it not focused on, showing off on it, but more just like making it all, just make it, make that warmth,
right.
that the musical magic, that makes shakes you out of your sleep,
Let that spirit come through the song.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're writing songs, how has it changed from once you first started to now bringing it to these talented musicians? Is it still kind of fearful and still nerve-wracking when you have an idea?
Oh yeah, it can be, because I tend to agonize over songs. What I do is when I write a song, I have a tendency to get the vibe first and the music, but there's a lot of times where, like, before I even start putting lyrics on it, but there's a lot of times where I realize I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do musically here because I don't know what I'm saying, there's until I know what I'm saying, I don't know where to take it next, so that's where I have to, like, when I show it to the guys, I have to be like, all right, do y'all get where this is coming? Has this got any, if I can get a song stuck in my head and think it's genius, and then 2 days later I'm like, oh God, I wish they should get it out of my head. So I have to show it to them and just go like, hey, is this sticking,
Yeah. I feel the same way with my videos. I think I put out a pretty impressive like edit, and then I come back to it the next morning, I rewatch it, I go, what the hell was I thinking? That was utter garbage. Why would you do that? That's still to this day, I feel like that. So when you're writing a song, do the lyrics come first, or does the tune come first?
Most of the time the tune does, or a line with the tune.
Yeah.
I pay so much more attention to the music or the vibe of the song than I do the lyrics. And to a point where sometimes it makes it weird, because I'm like, well, I've changed the lyrics on this so many times that I don't know what it means anymore.
Yeah.
That can happen.
When you're writing the lyrics, are you writing from experiences? Are you writing from what's going on in the world? What is the main source of inspiration in conjuring up these lyrics?
The lyrics are right that I like the best come from some kind of experience, even if I'm making up a story or I'm elaborating, embellishing, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never had a knack for. Some people can read about a historical figure and I'm going to write a song about that person. I've never had a knack for that. For me, it's always had to be a little more open-ended,
Is that so people can interpret this song in their own way?
Yeah, it's part of it is, that's just something I like to do. I like songs that take you one place and all of a sudden you're in another, that, Butch Hancock can do that really well. He can start about a particular story he's writing, and then it winds up being about a whole different. And I like when that's done right. When I try to do it, sometimes I have to go, is this hitting, or are people, am I fascinated that the storyline changed, or is it just kind of like scratching my head, why did that happen?
So as you guys have grown, don't mind that's just my electrical just shutting off the TV for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
That's weird. It's the ghost of this house. But as the music, as you have grown in a musician, how do you see the music industry now? As someone who is now involved with Spotify and the social media game, how has it changed?
Well, it's changed in ways that I don't comprehend, and I've had to just come to terms with that. When it comes to the recording side, I think the other guys in the band have a lot better. Eric absolutely has a lot better handle on that than I do, like what it means to get a lot of Spotify plays, how you do it, what it means to, what does it translate to? Yeah. I know from the booking angle that if you reach out to a big festival, you want to be on one of the big stages, the people booking it might have seen you and just absolutely love you and know you'd work, but they want to also see how many people are listening to you, which is understandable, but it's also a little maddening that we have let Spotify become the one and only industry standard. It's like I think Spotify should just be what it is. I don't think it should be I don't think any one platform should be the be all end all. But those things tend to change anyways. So
yeah.
Who knows?
I see, and there was this band that I saw at ACL called St. Vincent.
Oh yeah.
Do you know who they are?
Great band. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm about to shit on them. During their set, and they're playing the big stage, which I think it was a Chase stage or what? Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
It's the one where you're standing and you're looking at the skyline in the background.
Yeah. Okay.
And they announced that they were, after ACL, they were headed to LA to cut their first album.
Okay.
My gut instinct was like, you haven't made an album yet, you're up here on the main stage, one of the main stages. that doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, they hadn't made
any album. They hadn't made any album.
Okay.
And
I'm like, what's their secret?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'll need to go back and double check that. But I do feel like festivals are looking at artists that have the popularity in an app. Do you think that's fair?
I mean,
I want to hear the fans' perspective and then from your perspective as a working musician.
I don't know if I would use the word fair, just because the music industry, there's just nothing is fair.
Okay. That's a fair statement.
But do I like it? No, because, it's, I think there's something special about albums, but I will say this as a musician, I've always been a little puzzled that, like for instance, we put out this EP, it had 6 songs, the West XXLs, and we had it in CD form even, and then the radio stations a lot of times, well, do you have a CD, and
they're still asking for CDs.
There's some that do, yeah,
wow.
Believe it or not. It's kind of rare, but less and less are doing that. But the funny thing was that people that are going to like kind of talk about this in the broader world, this album, they're like, hey, come back when you have an album. Okay. And I'm just like, why not these 6 songs? Like, can I call it an album? If I called it an album,
yeah.
What's the funny? That's funny to me.
What's the definition of an album? Is it a certain songs?
I think now. I think that the Grammys are the ones that the Academy is the ones that get to determine that, and I think they shortened the definition. I don't know how much it is. I think it's like 7 songs maybe, or there's some terms like, is it a long album or is it blah blah blah. But that's for category. That's when that's for like categories, But it somehow trickles down to the rest of the industry can use that at times, like, is it an album release or is it? So to answer your question, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird if somebody can do it without a full album, but it's also like right now it's just like, if you manage to get that many people at a show and don't have an album yet, I'm like, how did you do it? That's kind of like, what's your secret?
Yeah. Well, when they said that, I'm like, what? I don't know. It threw my mind in a loop and I couldn't get out of it. And I felt like we're cheating artists now. Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It just seems like the loudest or the most visibility you have as a band is the most important thing, and the musicianship and the songwriting and all that comes second.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. No, but I will say, isn't it Spotify has a good analytics resource for you guys, right? And you can use that to your advantage.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. How do you guys use that to your advantage?
Well, I don't know. Eric would know how to answer that. It's definitely something that you can, I've known people who say that, they're like, I manage a band. We discovered through like Spotify that we had like all these fans in like Sweden or something. We went over there and like cleaned up, and I was like, okay, then that's got to be something, I mean, my thing about Spotify is that it's not one company's fault that music's free now. That's just how it goes. It's, you put information into the cloud and people are going to get it, and most of it, they're not going to pay for it. It's, to me, it's what I don't like is that so many gatekeepers are like that. If I don't care if you have 1 million fans, if you don't have enough Spotify number. I'm like that.
I think that's a wrong metric
That's
to
not
look at.
competitive,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That's
So what's it like having your father be in the greatest movie of our American cinema timeline?
Man, that movie, it's got this life. It's amazing to me because
What role does he play?
he's Smokey in that. You know, John Goodman pulls the gun on him and everything. And a funny thing is that, you know, a few years back, my dad and I went to, this was pre-pandemic, so I got to think it's like 6 years ago maybe. We went to the movie came out in mid-90s, you know, I think 96 or something. And so my dad and I, just a few years ago, we go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and the university there is doing this big Lebowski Fest show. You know, like they put it on the big screen and everybody watches, and they have a costume show on the stage after my dad and I play, and then they have the costume show, and they screen the movie. And it was a bunch of like 20-something-year-olds like dressing up the part of these people from a show in the 90s that any other movie, none of these kids would have known about it. And I was like, hey, and they're in costumes. And I was like, hey, so The Big Lebowski is the new Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, it's the movie that sticks around and it comes back around, and people dress, you know, little kids, you know, 4 decades later are still wearing those costumes, you know, and it's pretty wild.
How do you get involved?
The Coen brothers were fans of his.
Oh, okay.
They just said, hey, do you want to be in a movie? And he had been like little cameo type deals in different movies, you know, before, but he told them, he was like, I'm not an actor. And they were like, you know, we'll make sure this works, you know. And they did. I mean, you know, he delivered the lines that are now on bumper stickers. And it's
that's pretty wild and cool. And I didn't find that out till I think it was last year when I saw you performing with your dad. I'm like, oh, and then I made all the connections.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, makes sense. Well, what is on the horizon for the West Texas Exiles that you're allowed to talk about? Because I'm sure there's always stuff in the works. Yeah.
We're definitely going to be putting out our debut album in 2025. I can tell you that. I don't know when. And
then if you play ACL and get the big stage, then I will respect you guys.
There you go.
Like,
exactly.
You'll have my respect.
And maybe we'll put the album out before we play.
Yeah.
If we're on the big stage before the album comes out, I'll figure out who to blame for that.
Yeah, you better. So album, what else?
The album, it's called 8,000 Days. We got the title track and everything. We got a video for it. It's cool. Really good. Texas Chill Country made the video. And we're going to be recording more. We're going to be touring. We're definitely planning on touring the U.S. and maybe Europe. And
revisit Ireland and England.
Yes, absolutely. we want to do that. And we're going to be hitting you up for more videos and everything too.
Resolute Media is always open for business.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for stopping by. That was well over an hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a cool thing about these podcasts is they fly by, and I'm always
they do. You're doing it well. It's great.
Thank you. No, it's always the guests that really keeps me engaged, and I'm always fascinated about the stories that you guys have as musicians, and I think you guys are doing really good things, not only for yourselves but for the greater Austin music scene, and I think everyone appreciates all that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last words before this is published?
Oh man, happy holidays.
Yep.
And
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Here's to a wonderful 2025.
Oh man, yep, it's gonna be a good one. I can feel it.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.